Welcome into Big Ten Today. So happy to have you here. I'm Kyla Mills. A lot to get to on this Wednesday. We'll talk some hoops. We'll talk a lot of football, including the Peach Bowl, which is now just 2 days away. Plus some major news out in Seattle. We have a special guest who will be joining us to break down all of the chaos surrounding the transfer of Washington quarterback Damon Williams Jr. But now joining us is Jerry DiNardo, who's going to help us look ahead to a huge CFP semifinal matchup featuring two Big Ten teams. Jerry, great to see you. Thanks so much for taking the time to hang with us here on Big Ten Today. Let's start with that big CFP semifinal matchup going on down in Atlanta in just a couple of days. These are two teams that met about 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago at this point, with Indiana earning a huge upset at Oregon on the road. We heard head coach Curt Cignetti tell our crew after the game that it's hard to beat a team twice. How much stock do you actually put into that?
You know, people say that it doesn't really motivate and that revenge isn't a motivation. Of course, revenge is a motivation. Kylan, have you ever lost to someone athletically or any other way and then got a chance to play them again and didn't reflect back on the first game? So maybe coaches don't use the word revenge, but certainly it is hard to beat someone twice. We know this, if neither team has changed, we could expect the same result. But as you and I know, teams change a lot during the season.
All right, we'll check the box, plenty of motivation. Then we'll also dive into what some of those things are that have changed between these two teams and some of the keys here in just a few. But first, let's take a look back at that initial matchup, which is today's big story. This is a rematch from October 11th. 7th-ranked Indiana at the time took down 3rd-ranked Oregon 30-20 in Eugene. Indiana's defensive line made Dante Moore's life extremely difficult, recording 6 sacks and 8 tackles for loss. However, Oregon's defense came through with a big moment. Freshman DB Brandon Finney ran back an interception to tie the game up at 20 apiece in the 4th quarter. However, the Hoosiers scored the final 10 points of the game to seal this big-time victory. This was a huge statement win for the Hoosiers at the time. A top-5 road win sent the message that Indiana's for real. This is not a fluke. It also was historic in a number of ways. This was the first AP top-5 road win in program history. As they get ready for round 2, some of the Ducks and Hoosiers reflected on that regular season meeting.
Winning that game, it definitely instills even more confidence just because you're playing a great team. What were they? I forget what they were at the time, but definitely top 10 team. And then just being able to go on the road in a hostile environment and pull out a win in a game that was going back and forth like that, it definitely gives you a bit of confidence. But winning that game in October isn't going to do anything for us now coming up on Friday. So it's a whole new ball game. We gotta have a great week of practice to face this great team.
I'm a believer everything happens for a reason. I think we needed that to kind of wake us up. Obviously, we came off a big Penn State win and kind of thought we were, pretty cool going into that week and pretty confident and got a little lackadaisical with our prep, I think. So it was a good wake-up call. And, I think the rest of the season leading up to this point is a pretty good testament to the way we responded to that loss.
Round 2 between Oregon and Indiana now comes on the biggest stage with a shot to go to the national championship game. Jerry, when you look at these college football playoff matchups, they often come down to 4 things, one of those being the line of scrimmage and the line play. Last time around, Indiana's defensive line really made Dante Moore uncomfortable. How have you seen these two lines maybe change from October to now, and what are you expecting in this matchup?
Yeah, I would start on defense. It's pretty obvious that these are two very physical, very athletic defensive lines. I think they'll give anyone a real challenge at the line of scrimmage. So I would expect not too much to change there, Kylan, with the defensive line. They're big, they're strong, they're athletic, and they can really play as well as any defensive lines in the country. I think where the difference is the offensive line. Let's go back to the beginning of the season. Remember, Curt Cignetti said after last year, after the 2024 season, that it looked different when we played the big boys. And that he was talking about the line of scrimmage then. And so he added 3 guys to the portal, 3 veteran guys. Pat Coogan was one of those from Notre Dame. He was the MVP of the Rose Bowl, the offensive MVP. I don't know the last time an offensive lineman was ever an MVP in a game. So Indiana came into the season with a veteran offensive line, and they're still playing like a veteran offensive line. Oregon, on the other hand, had to replace 4 starters from the 24 team. It's taken them a little bit more time, but they have developed. In fact, the Joe Moore Award that's given to the most outstanding offensive line, the 3 finalists, Kylan, were all from the Big Ten. Iowa was a finalist. They won it. But Indiana and Oregon were also finalists. So to say that the offensive line of Oregon hasn't changed, I think is a serious mistake. They're much better than they were in the beginning of the year. And Indiana has improved as well. They wouldn't have been a finalist for the Joe Moore Award if they hadn't. But they just got off to a faster start than Oregon. So, we're going to look at some situations in championship football. It's all about short yardage, goal line, the red zone. And you think about how many 4th downs that Oregon goes for, you've got to have really good offensive line play.
These are also quarterbacks that also largely operate in the pocket. They need to be protected by the offensive line. And then you look at another important factor in these college football playoff games, and that's the run game for both Oregon and Indiana. So much of what they're able to do in the air is predicated on the ability to establish the game on the ground. Both of these teams have multiple options in the backfield. What's been the progression of the run game from both Indiana and Oregon in your eyes?
Yeah, Kylan, this is a little bit of the conversation about the line of scrimmage, but digging deeper into the run game. And when I talk about run game, I don't look at the official stats. I look at how many yards the tailback has. And in the first game, they both had around 100 yards. If you look at the tailback position, they only averaged about 3 yards a carry. So both teams came out of the first game with a very, very average offensive line play and a very average tailback run game. You look at the next game. Now, I didn't look at James Madison with Oregon, but if you look at Oregon against Texas Tech, which is a really, really good defense, they haven't really progressed all that much if you look at the stats from the tailback. So they're going to have to get better, not only better than when they first played Indiana, but also better when they played last week against Texas Tech. Now, the Indiana offense, 199 tailback yards against Alabama. And this isn't a great Alabama team. Maybe you could even question whether they should have been in the playoffs or not, but it's still Alabama. There's still talent in the defensive line. So I see growth.
Oregon team that, you've got the freshman Jordan Davison, who just had a really good game in the Orange Bowl, but you've got De'Aaron Hill Jr., you've got the upperclassmen and Noah Whittington. And then Indiana has 2 different backs as well who are so effective. Could that impact this game in any way? Or I guess, how does that impact the game in terms of having that diversity of different backfield options?
Yeah, this has really become the way you run tailbacks. I mean, back in the day, the one tailback was trying to get 1,000 yards. You were giving him the ball 30 times a game. Offenses have really changed in college football, especially in the pass game. But you bring up a great point. You're also seeing, and part of this is because of recruiting, because you can tell a running back, hey, we don't have just one running back. We're going to get you in the game. And the season's longer, the game's longer, and so on. So the more running backs you can get in there, the fresher the legs are. Some are better in the red zone. Some are better in 1st and 10. There's definitely a trend, especially with these 2 teams, to get as many people involved in the run game at tailback as they can.
All right, Jerry, we'll hear from you much more here in just a few minutes. But first, in terms of Oregon and Indiana and that run game, how can it also help open up things in the air for both of these quarterbacks? Like, how important is it that they establish the run game early in order to do what they want to do and have those options to throw downfield?
Well, there's been a lot of changes in college football, but that's one thing that hasn't changed. Until you get the defense to defend the run, you're going to have coverage on the back end that you don't want to see. And as soon as someone adds a defensive back to the box to stop the run, then obviously you have one less player in the back end playing the pass game. So until you get someone out of the box, in the box to stop the run, there really is no pass game. That's one of the fundamentals that hasn't changed in college football.
Indiana and Oregon going toe-to-toe in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta on Friday. Jerry, we're going to talk much more about a couple of those other aspects of the game that are going to be super important in a CFP semifinal matchup, a spot in the national championship game on the line. Jerry, we turn our attention now to Seattle for news that's dominated headlines in the last 24 hours. Washington quarterback Damon Williams Jr. announced on his Instagram page last night that he's entering the transfer portal. This comes just days after it was reported that Williams signed a revenue-sharing agreement with the school. Yahoo Sports and Big Ten Network insider Ross Dellenger is reporting that he's been told it was a legally binding agreement, which leaves a lot of questions yet to be answered. Speaking of Ross, the man himself is joining us now here on Big Ten Today. Ross Dellenger, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate you joining us. I'm sure your phone has been just blowing up in the last 24 hours, so we do appreciate you stopping by. Man, 1 week ago, things seem to be going fantastic in Seattle. You dominate a bowl game. Your quarterback appears to be coming back. If you're Jed Fish, things are looking up, and that's all blown up in the last 24 hours after quarterback Damon Williams Jr. announced via social media that he's transferring. How did we get here? What's happened?
Yeah, a crazy few days, few hours. Just 3 days ago, I think, 3 or 4 days ago, Damon Williams signed a revenue share contract with the University of Washington. The University of Washington, I believe, announced that. Damon, I think himself, I believe, announced that on social media. UW officials in the Big Ten described the document, the revenue share contract that's being signed by many athletes with schools all over the country. They described this as a legally binding document. All Big Ten schools actually use the same or very similar of like a template document from the league that's been drafted by the conference just for probably these purposes, right? But they drafted this thing very carefully. So right now, the latest from Seattle is that the school does not plan on inputting Damon Williams' name into the transfer portal. Schools are in control over inputting or not a player's name into the portal. And according to the Big Ten's template document, once you sign that document, you are bound to that school and you are prohibited from entering the transfer portal. The Big Ten is actually very active, has been very active and involved in this situation. Commissioner Tony Petitti, as it turns out, is coincidentally in Seattle for memorial service for the soccer player there at UW that had passed, Mia. And so he was actually on the ground when all this sort of happened.
Yeah, Mia Hammond, they just had some services for her last night. This is all still a lot to take in. What, if any, recourse does the University of Washington have in a situation like this where you've been reporting there has been a legally binding document signed?
Well, there's expected to be communication today from Washington in Damon Williams' representatives regarding the situation. What exactly will be said, kind of unclear, but as I mentioned earlier, the Huskies don't plan on releasing Damon from his agreement, and they don't plan on inserting his name into the portal. This agreement is toward one of the highest in college football. From what I understand, it's a 1-year revenue share agreement worth about $4 million. That puts him probably in the top 10 to 15 of quarterbacks in the country, and certainly in the top 20 or 25 of players in the country. So it's a fairly lucrative agreement. According to some at UW, they suspect tampering, obviously, with another school or schools. And this is a similar situation that unfolded at Wisconsin with Xavier Lucas and the University of Miami that led to a lawsuit. And so right now we're sitting in a position, or UW's at a position where they're not going to put Damon's name into the portal. So he can't communicate. If they won't put him in the portal, he can't communicate with other schools, or are not supposed to communicate. He's not supposed to communicate with other schools. We have probably a tampering lawsuit. Same what happened with Wisconsin and Miami on the verge here.
Yeah, there's so much talk right now about what the legal precedent this could set, what the implications are, but I can't imagine what this is like for the Washington coaches, the players that are committed to this school. What's next for Washington on the football field in light of all of this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was told that actually a lot of players and coaches found out through social media, Damon's post on social media, that he was leaving because all the services, the memorial services and all that were happening yesterday, sort of when all this went down. But what does Washington do now? Well, it's in a tough spot, right? If Damon does end up leaving, while the portal is still open for 10 more days, the recruiting of the major conference sort of transfer quarterbacks is much more accelerated, and many of them have already committed or will commit very soon to their new destination. So this certainly puts Washington in a tough spot and kind of behind the eight ball a little bit in the race for getting any kind of transfer quarterback.
Yeah, again, it's hard to kind of fathom how all of this is going to play out. You've talked to officials at the University of Washington, as you mentioned. What's the feeling like right now in Seattle surrounding this whole situation in the athletic department?
Well, there's certainly frustration, right? Right now in college athletics, this is the first year of where schools can directly pay players in a revenue sharing agreement that came into being from the NCAA settlement of the House case. And so there's a thought that these agreements with players will be binding, or if they're not binding, they will be in a similar way to a coach's contract. They will have buyouts, a penalty to leave. And so right now we could be seeing, with this case, precedent set on exactly how these contracts will be handled going forward across college athletics.
Yeah, you touched on what I wanted to finish up with here, just in terms of the bigger implications as you zoom out and look at the future of college football. Like, what does this mean? How does this need to be handled moving forward as this sport navigates this new era in NIL and revenue sharing?
Well, there's really only three paths forward in college athletics right now to solve these sort of issues, right? One is a reliance on Congress passing the federal legislation of some sort. The NCAA has tried, and the major conferences have tried now for 6 years to get Congress to pass legislation. It's very close, or was very close this past fall, but ultimately failed. There's progress still being made towards some kind of congressional legislation. So that's one path, right? Another is to go all in, like the NFL, and collectively bargain and deem players as employees. And then the third path is everybody agreeing to play by the rules, which is hard in college athletics.
What a concept.
In fact, there's a recent sort of example of that. The College Sports Commission, the new enforcement body over the sport that was kind of created by the power conferences, the College Sports Commission's participation agreement, which basically all power leagues are required to sign in order to waive their right to sue the CSC over enforcement so that the CSC could enforce some of these things, has not been signed. So all these three avenues right now, there are hurdles in each of them, but college sports will not be able to move forward past this messy time until something happens. Either Congress, collective bargaining, or everybody agrees to play by the rules and not sue the enforcement entity.
It just feels like we're on the brink of major change where college sports is never going to look the same as what it was before. Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports, thanks so much for joining us. Like I said, know you're a busy guy with all of this going on. We really appreciate you keeping us up to speed. The second-ranked Michigan Wolverines fought off an upset bid from Penn State en route to a 74-72 win last night. The Wolverines were up by as many as 15 in the second half, but the Nittany Lions kept plugging away. Penn State used a 7-0 run to make it a one-point game with just over a minute to go, but Michigan's defense showed up in the final moments to seal the win. Head coach Dusty May and Mike Rhodes after the game.
Obviously, you have studs. You've been talked about all season long, undefeated, but guys understand their roles on their team, and you had a lot of guys who stepped up off that bench and a couple of starters who played those roles perfectly.
No question. And like you said, we need these games. We need the defensive reps. At our last possession, we buckled down, stayed in front of the ball, and forced a tough contested shot. So we're going to lean back on some of these lessons for the next couple weeks.
Yeah, one of the lessons I think people are learning is, yes, you can score the ball, but defensively, to me, it's turning out to be your identity. And at the end there, Yaxel did a nice job pushing the ball away from the basket. Defense ended up winning this game for you in the end.
No question. We had to rely on it. Offensively, we weren't on the same page. There's a little bit of yin to each one's yang, but we'll get that fixed, and we believe in our guys. We had a tough night, but we'll be better because of this.
Yeah, you get the win, and at the end of the night, you're all still together.
No question.
I didn't come here to do this bull. I want to win. And I don't care if it's a 1-point game or a 30-point game. I mean, I've been coaching long enough. Like, we all go through this, and but I want to win, and I want these guys to win. And to win, a lot of things go into it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pissed.
All right, Sean, Mike Rhodes not holding anything back there in the postgame. Penn State on the precipice of what would have been maybe the biggest upset this college basketball season. I don't know if I'm off base in saying that. Nittany Lions, though, mounted what looked like it was going to be an incredible comeback, just couldn't finish the job. How would you evaluate the close of this game specifically?
Well, and I think to your point, the fact that Penn State was able to put forth that performance with their leading scorer not available to them, they got a tremendous amount of performance and execution from guys that hadn't done it so far. You know, they got a double-double from Josh Reed. There's a lot of new guys, a lot of new moving parts there for Coach Mike Rhodes in State College. But it was a very, very good opportunity that slipped away. You know, it was no fluke. They played hard. They're going to get after you on the defensive end, but Michigan just had the ability to make enough plays, and they built a big enough lead that Penn State, without Mingo at the end, where they could put the ball in his hands and maybe get something going toward the rim, I think that would have been the difference. But that should not diminish what Penn State was able to do against a team in Michigan that had been destroying people by 35 or 40 points. And you know, Dellenger, you know, he's been around the block. This is a guy that wasn't afraid to take the big shot. You had a lot of other inexperienced guys there. That's a heartbreaking loss from Penn State, but they can learn from it. You heard Dusty May talk about how Michigan can learn from it. I think Penn State can as well, because they'll go back and they'll look at a couple of situations that maybe they could have gotten a little bit of an easier shot, or look what we're capable of doing when we're locked in and we get some performances from other guys. Josh Reed really good off the bench with a double-double for him.
Yeah, you mentioned Caden Mingo not available in this game for Penn State. On the other side for Michigan, you just pointed out they've been dominating teams. This was their first single possession game in their last 11. Dusty May talked about this being a learning opportunity. How can Michigan grow from this type of game and kind of what you're going to see in terms of Big Ten road contests?
Well, going on the road anywhere is going to be extremely difficult. But I think the one thing they'll take away from this is that, look, college basketball, as much as some people want to make it, it's not a video game, okay? It's still played by living, breathing people, and they've got to go out and perform. And, you know, the other team has scholarship guys too. So I don't think that in any way they were overlooking this game. But when you have been destroying people, not just beating, I mean destroying people, high-caliber teams by 35 and 40 points, human nature being what it is, you go into a situation – no students there for Penn State. That, you know, the atmosphere was good, but it wasn't great like some of the other ones you faced. And you're playing a team in Penn State that is very well coached in Mike Rhodes. So it was a little bit surprising how close it was. But they're going to have more games like this because I think Michigan. I personally think they're the best team in the country right now, and Penn State pushed them to the precipice. But both of the teams can learn from this. But you know, for Michigan, look, just continue to play and block out all the noise. Because if they'd have lost this game, the same people that were telling them that they're the greatest team in the last 15 years would have been telling them they're terrible. So just worry about what the guys in the locker room are worried about, you know, and Johnny's sitting at home waiting for mom to bring him cocoa. Who cares?
Hey, what do you got against people named Johnny there, Sean? Take it easy. Michigan, though, does avoid the upset, 14-0 now and 4-0 in Big Ten play. Elsewhere in the Big Ten, there was a massive upset, though. In the Midwest, Minnesota knocked off number 19 Iowa in a thriller at the Barn. Much like the Michigan-Penn State game, this game came down to really the final minute. The Gophers had about a 3-possession lead for most of the second half, but a late push from the Hawkeyes made it a 3-point game with 16 seconds to go. Iowa had the chance to tie it on the final possession. You just saw some of the shots, missed 3 straight from beyond the arc to end this game. And then you saw the storm that broke out at the Barn. Sean, you survived that storm as you were on the call for this thriller between Minnesota and Iowa, and the Gophers get a big-time win under head coach Nico Medved. What stuck out to you about the closeout of this game as you got to watch it up close and personal?
Well, that last segment was really, if you're Minnesota, they had to be gasping every time that a shot went up because they had 3 really good shots at the rim. And the guy that I want to give credit to for making that possible, Manuel for Iowa, got 2 offensive rebounds and kicked it out to 2 outstanding shooters in Sturtz and Hassan. So, I mean, he made a couple of big-time plays for Iowa. They just weren't able to knock down shots. I think the difference was, you know, Minnesota in the first half was able to kind of get Bennett Sturtz out of the game with foul trouble. And, you know, Iowa just wasn't able in the first half to get anything going offensively. But these are two we were talking before I came on here. These are two outstanding coaches. I mean, this has always been a league that has had a roster of tremendous coaches. And these two guys at their respective universities are wonderful additions to that tradition. And it showed last night. The level of detail that both of these teams went over and shoot around was really impressive.
And you look at Nico Medved in year one, has had to deal with multiple starters going down with injuries. You need other guys to step up, like guard Langston Reynolds, who finished this game with 22 points, extremely efficient, 9 of 13 from the floor. How have you seen him emerge as a leader for this Gophers team in light of some of those injuries?
Yeah, he's been really impressive. I've been fortunate enough to have their last two games. In the game before on the road win at Northwestern, he dishes out 13 assists because that was what the team needed him to do, and they were able to execute their backdoor cuts. Last night in the Twin Cities, his number got called a little bit more, and he goes out and he gets 22 points and shows the ability to play off the ball. And this is the area where I think he and Crocker Johnson are as good as anybody. They don't have a lot of guys. They're only playing 7 players. And Langston Reynolds can guard multiple positions. He showed that last night. And between he and Crocker Johnson over the course of time, even though Sturtz got his points in the second half, they were able to kind of wear him down on the defensive end of the floor. But Reynolds showed you his versatility. He was a distributor the previous game. Here they needed him to score. He did it. He hit some timely free throws. And Crocker Johnson, I think, at the 5 spot, along with Reynolds, are two of the best stories in the conference so far, transferring over to Minnesota. And this is really a team that doesn't go very deep. So you don't have to do a whole lot of prep and figuring out who's going to play because, the game before at Northwestern, Minnesota had 3 guys played 40 minutes. And I'm old. I've been around a while. It's been a while since I've seen that.
I can't imagine doing anything for 40 minutes. What about you, Sean?
Sleeping. I'm good at that.
Okay, that we can handle. Minnesota, though, has now won 5 straight. Certainly a team to keep an eye on. And then Iowa, also really good Big Ten team that you expect to bounce back. Wisconsin, meanwhile, a team that you'd say maybe was in a must-win situation as they faced UCLA. They get the dub at the Kohl Center, 80-72. This was a Badgers team reeling a little bit, Sean, going into this game. How'd you see them flip the script and get this one done?
Well, they've become a really good three-point shooting team that kind of had abandoned them recently. But in the first half, that was what allowed them to build that big lead over UCLA. They hit 8 threes in the first half, and they were able to kind of get out in the open floor after that. Boyd had a nice game for them at the point guard position. But knocking down those threes allowed them to build a lead. It kind of went south on them a little bit in the second half. They didn't shoot nearly as well from behind the arc as they did in the first 20 minutes, but they built a big enough of a cushion, and they got just enough stops down the stretch to kind of pull it out. And a guy that has been really impressive to me has been Nolan Winter. This is a guy that a year ago made 72% of his 2-point shots, and he's become a much more consistent and viable 3-point shooter as well. 2 of 5 last night, but to me the biggest thing for him has been his ability to deliver on the backboards, because at times last year he might have 2-3 rebounds. They can't have that. Had another 8 boards last night. So I think that was a game that Wisconsin needed to win. You had a UCLA team that's in the midst of a road trip. You don't want to give them any kind of confidence, especially coming out of the gate. They didn't. They knocked down enough threes to build a significant enough lead, and then they were able to hold on at the end. So that's a quality win, as all of them are. But that would have been a tough one to lose if you were Wisconsin at home.
That was Wisconsin's first win over a high major opponent in exactly a month. So great. Now you have a ton of momentum going into your next game, where you'll face Michigan. Just casually, the best team in the country, according to Sean Morris. So a lot more to look forward to in terms of Big Ten play. Well, Sardo back with us to dive deeper into this Peach Bowl matchup between Indiana and Oregon. Both teams looking to punch their ticket to the national championship game. We're talking about some of the different factors, Jerry, that impact a college football playoff game. We've not yet talked about the defenses. Oregon coming off a dominant performance in the Orange Bowl, shutting out a top 3 scoring offense in Texas Tech. Indiana maybe equally as impressive in the Rose Bowl, holding a really good Alabama offense to just 3 points. What intrigues you about the defensive matchup in this game?
Yeah, they're both really good defenses, Kylan, as you mentioned. And if you compare their total number of yards they gave up in the first game, they're pretty similar. Where I think the difference is in their pressure package. I think Indiana does a great job with simulated pressure, meaning that before the snap, there's 6 people on the line of scrimmage, and you don't know who's going to rush and who's going to drop. Ultimately, it winds up being a 4 man rush, but you didn't know that before the snap. So I think Indiana's done a better job at simulated pressure. Everyone is doing this, but Indiana does it really well. I think what we've learned about the quarterbacks is that Fernando is incredibly calm when he has pressure in his face. I would say to you, I have never seen a tougher quarterback than Mendoza. I mean, he will hold on to the ball till the very last second and take a shot as soon as it releases his hand. When you look at the winning touchdown at Penn State, it's a great example. In fact, there were many those shots that he took right after he released the ball against Penn State. And so it makes you think, you know, how much does Oregon really want to pressure him? Because if they pressure him and he holds the ball right until he can't, that's going to really put a lot of pressure on a defensive back. Dante Moore is a little bit different. He's had some issues with hanging onto the ball a little bit too long, and that was one of the reasons they had 6 sacks in their first game. Now he has grown in that way, but if you took both of them together, it looks like Fernando's a little better with pressure in his face. But Kyle, let's talk about, we're talking about the Heisman Trophy winner, and we're talking about 2 first-round draft picks. And so both of these guys can handle the pressure. I think Mendoza appears to be the one who's done it better, but Dante has certainly grown since the first game.
It's hard to believe we've gotten this far in the show, Jerry, without talking about quarterback play, because it is more influential than it ever has been before. And there's this narrative. You've got the Heisman Trophy winner in Fernando Mendoza. But I talked to so many people covering the Orange Bowl last week who told me they believe that Dante Moore is the most talented quarterback in the nation. He's projected to be the number 1 or 2 pick in the upcoming NFL draft. What's going to be the key for him to be successful in this game?
We've talked about 4 things, right? It's the most successful quarterback will be the one that is supported by those 3 things that we talked about. We started to talk about line of scrimmage. I'm going to have a pass rush in my face. I have an offensive line that is trying to protect me. Whatever quarterback has the best chance of being protected by the offensive line will have the better day. We talked about a run game. These are 2 pocket passes. They're not dual threat quarterbacks. These are NFL-style quarterbacks. In the NFL, it's about the run game. It's about the defense. And this game is going to be the same. So we talked about the line of scrimmage in general. We talked about the offensive line specifically. Whichever offensive line performs better will help the quarterbacks perform better. Defense is field position. You give a quarterback, especially a first-round draft pick, give a quarterback good field position, and that's going to make them a great quarterback in that game. So without doubt, they're talented, but I would say to you, who has the best line of scrimmage to support them, who has the best run game to support them, and who has the best defense to give them the best field position. That quarterback, when you're talking about 2 first-round draft picks, that quarterback will most likely play the best, whoever gets the best support from the 3 factors.
This is going to be so much fun to watch. 2 elite teams, 2 elite head coaches going toe-to-toe, and Dan Lanning and Curt Cignetti. How impactful is it to see the Big Ten playing on this stage, looking to go to a national championship game for the 3rd straight year?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that if you look at the history of all these teams, except for Indiana, obviously, but you know, the world used to be flat, now it's round. I mean, we don't know where Indiana's going from this point on. But Oregon's always been in the national championship picture recently. The conference is 18 teams. I say this all the time about our conference. If you look at the 18 schools and they're all maximizing their resources, they're clearly the best football conference in the country. When you look at the history of the traditional Big Ten teams, you look at the 3 expansions that we've had, again, everyone maximizes their resources, which everyone's not doing right now. But when that day comes, there's no other conference that can touch the Big Ten.
Best football conference in the country. Jerry DiNardo said it. Mic drop right there. Thanks so much for hanging with us here, my friend. We look forward to hearing more from you as the march towards the national championship game continues.
Thanks, Kyla.
The Oregon women's basketball team is trending up after a huge top 25 road win yesterday. The Ducks scored the final 14 points of the game to take down 21st-ranked USC in LA. Junior guard Ari Long hit 3 consecutive three-pointers during that decisive run to give Oregon the lead. Head coach Kelly Graves on the big win.
Well, it's been the same MO. I mean, first of all, I'm really proud of our team. My goodness sakes, they just kept battling, But unfortunately, we dig ourselves a big hole. It's kind of been what we've done. And for the first time, we were able to dig ourselves out of it. But maybe I'm going to tell the referees next game, we're behind 10. Just put 10 points on the board. But again, the defense at times wasn't very good early. But I thought in that fourth quarter, and really for the most of the second half, we really defended well and we rebounded better and we just played with a lot more heart.
Tonight, a massive women's hoops game is coming your way between 19th-ranked Ohio State and Illinois. Both teams 13-2 coming into this matchup. The Buckeyes, of course, known for their defensive pressure, forcing 24.5 turnovers per game. The Illini, though, coming off a huge upset of a top 10 Maryland team. You can watch that game between the Buckeyes and Illini only on Big Ten Plus and the Fox Sports app. It's a Wednesday Night Hoops doubleheader. First, Indiana takes on Maryland on the men's side. Then 5th-ranked Purdue hosts Washington. Coverage begins with a tip-off show at 6 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Pacific on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. To talk more about the men's hoops slate to come, we say hello once again to Sean Morris. Sean, are you hiding the IV that I assume is pumping caffeine into your blood right now?
It's all good. It's a state secret, but I'm running just fine. It's a well-oiled machine we run here, Kylan, for sure.
It's incredible because you're calling a game in Minnesota. I know you're heading on the road to call some more games the next few days. But let's talk about this matchup between Washington and Purdue. I know you're most interested in the matchup in the front court. Why is that? What's so interesting to you about the bigs in this game?
Well, there are a couple of outstanding guys that with back to the basket. And with Steinbach from Washington, you're talking about maybe the top pick in the upcoming NBA draft. I don't think he's going to be in college very long, and deservedly so. This is a guy that's averaging a double-double and is just such a handful because not only can he score with his back to the basket, but he can turn, face, more than a capable passer. And he's going to go against the front line and Kaufman-Wren as well as physically with Clough. For Oscar Clough for Purdue. This is going to be really interesting to see how they play because both of these teams like to establish an inside presence. How the game is officiated, I think, is going to be really important if either one of those guys get in foul trouble. But the back to the basket ability to score, especially from a guy like Steinbach, not just with his ability to do that, but to score from the perimeter in the short corner, how he matches up with Clough and maybe gets him on the move if Clough draws the initial defensive assignment. It's going to be very, very intriguing to watch. And Purdue's going to have their hands full with a team in Washington that once they get finally fully healthy is really going to be a tough matchup. They just battled so many injuries here in the early going.
Yeah, Steinbach earlier this year was named to Rafael Davis's all-dog team, which is pretty much the highest stamp of approval from anyone in the Big Ten. Rafael, he's very particular about who are his guys and who are his dogs, but that should be a great matchup between the Huskies and the Boilers. And don't sleep on Washington. I feel like, Sean, they are a massively improved team from where they were at a year ago. Like, that's not an easy win for any team in the Big Ten, no?
No, I agree. And again, once they start to get healthy, they've been out without Claude for a while. They've been without Yates. Now they're starting to incorporate those guys back into the lineup. And this is going to be a very difficult game for Purdue. I think Washington's going to come in there a little bit irritated. I think they had a game at Indiana. They thought they might have a chance to win on this road swing. So, Washington is a very, very talented team. And once they get healthy and get that backcourt in particular incorporated with Steinbach, that's going to be a tough out as the Big Ten season kind of moves along, especially once you get to the back end and it makes that turn after 10 games.
You just brought up the Hoosiers. They're also in action tonight taking on Maryland. What are you looking forward to most in that matchup?
Well, Maryland, if you look at the stats initially, and if you're looking at it from Indiana's standpoint, you'd say, well, Maryland's last in the conference in defending the three. That's kind of where our strength is. You certainly want to go in there and make sure that what you do offensively doesn't go away. But I think for Indiana, it's going to be imperative that they rebound the ball. That was their big difference when they beat a very talented Washington team at home earlier this week. So they're going to need to rebound the ball. And I think Sam Alexis is going to have a big game individually in terms of rebounding the ball. He had 5 offensive rebounds against Washington. I'm not saying he has to do that, but I think he has to do a really good job of cleaning up on the backboard, especially if this may be the game that Pharrell Payne is able to come back and play for Maryland. He's been in and out of the lineup. He's been out most recently with some injuries. But if Payne is able to come back and play, that is a guy that will absolutely punish you on the backboard, especially on the offensive end, if you don't do your job. So Sam Alexis will have to have a really big game individually in terms of rebounding, but much like they did against Washington, it's going to have to kind of be all hands on deck for an Indiana squad that can shoot you, out of it from deep. But when they rebound the ball, that's when they become a much more difficult team to beat. Last game with Washington being a really good example. So take that on the road with you because they're going to need it against the Maryland team that is going to attack you.
Indiana, Maryland, a game to watch tonight. Sean, before we let you go, we had a Sean's Take segment that had to be cut down a little bit due to some football news, but I want to give you the opportunity to answer one question that I was really excited to talk with you about. What has been your biggest surprise in the Big Ten this season?
For me, it has to be the Nebraska Cornhuskers. What they have done, especially with the return of Rink Mast, has really been impressive. And, you're talking about their undefeated run, and you should, because that's very impressive. But it hasn't been against a whole lot of caliber opponents. They've beaten teams from the Big East, the Big 12, the SEC, once Mountain West. Even before they got into conference play, they share the ball. They move defensively. They've been outstanding. But, I'm not saying he will be named the most valuable player in the league, but I think it would be very, very hard to find somebody who's been more important to his team's success than Rink Mast. And the fact that he was out last year, I think Nebraska has to look, if we'd had this guy probably make a big tournament, but then back this year, we have a chance to make a run.
Thanks so much, Sean, and thanks for joining us on Big Ten Today. We'll see you next time.